what Josh Hammer tweeted. He tweeted a total of 9 times on September 9th, and you can gather what was going on that day from his tweets. He wakes up at 7:30 A6, or rather pushes the first tweet at 7:36 a.m., and he tweets about a viral Phillies crowd scandal. This is in Eastern Standard Time, by the way. Right after that, he tweets a link, the one that I just showed you, to his media appearance about Irina Zarutska, where he does not call for the death penalty or anything close to the death penalty. 9:23 a.m., he tweets against Tucker Carlson, because he has to do that at least twice a day, or I don't.
It's like eating for him. He needs it for sustenance, right? It's like sleeping or eating, or you know. The thing that sticks out to me is the 5:58 p.m. tweet. He tweets about the Hebrew Bible being the basis of Western civilization. Isn't he an Orthodox Jew? That confuses me if he's talking about the Hebrew Bible being the basis of Western civilization. But I don't know where he stands on this, and I can't see anything from the clip that says he wasn't referring to Irina's murder in that video. It doesn't by omission mean that he wasn't talking about that in the tweet, but not in the interview. But at the same time, I guess this is helpful to get context. I'd like to hear from Josh. I don't know that we'd be hearing from him in quite a while, though.
Feel like he can get on with his day. 9:29 a.m., he tweets in favor of Israel and throws shade at Trump and Qatar. And all of this is related to what went on September 9th, which is that Israel bombed Qatar for no reason, violating international law, which they tend to do a lot. But he, of course, was in favor of what they were doing. And so he throws shade.
Of course he was a proponent of bombing the hostage negotiators in Doha. Because, of course, you can predict this to a T. There's 2 anti-Tucker Carlson quotes, right? There's one promoting him. There's one, throwing shade at Qatar, and one about the public execution. Like, you can pretty much script this guy out at this point.
At Trump and Trump's relationship with Qatar, because I guess it would be okay for them to violate international law if Trump wasn't friends with Qatar or something. 11:33 a.m., he tweets against Saudi Arabia because they came out and made a statement against what Israel had done. So he tweets against Saudi Arabia. And then at 3 o'clock p.m., he tweets against Tucker Carlson for telling the truth about Israel and 9/11. Again, he has to do that a couple of times a day. It's part of his ritual. 5:58 p.m., he tweets about the Hebrew Bible being the basis of Western civilization alongside a speech that he had given, tweets a link out, again, promoting himself. 5:59 p.m., he tweets a promotion of his media appearance regarding a Supreme Court decision. And then there's this 3-hour break. He puts his phone down. Maybe this is a 3-hour break where he speaks to Charlie Kirk.
Leaked messages, timing quirks on social feeds, and sudden public defenses have turned the last days of Charlie Kirk into a crucible of accusation and mistrust. If you want first-hand updates on this developing story and others, hit subscribe and turn on the bell now. A single allegation can cascade into a national controversy when it touches politics, money, and media personalities. The material now circulating, private screenshots, public tweets, and testimonies from high-profile commentators, claims that Charlie Kirk quietly renounced the pro-Israel cause shortly before his killing, that several of his close associates saw those private messages and stayed publicly silent, and that at least one well-known pundit engaged in messaging that observers now read as defensive, opportunistic, or evasive. This report walks through what has been alleged, why each claim matters, how corroboration would look, and why independent verification is essential. I will treat assertions as allegations where appropriate, note where corroboration has been claimed, and explain what kind of evidence would settle each question. Start with the broad claim. Leaked screenshots suggest Kirk privately wrote, "Have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." Private messages, when authentic, provide a rare window into a person's immediate thoughts. If an influential figure expresses to confidants that they intend to step away from a cause, that statement can change how donors, allies, and rivals behave, and it can reframe how the public interprets subsequent events. The screenshots now circulating purportedly show exactly this. A short, blunt resignation from a public line Kirk had previously held. Critics argue that such a private admission would explain why some associates later publicly defended positions inconsistent with what Kirk privately believed. Supporters say that private messages are often partial, written in the heat of the moment, and should not be read as a definitive pivot without context. The critical next steps are documentary, forensic authentication of the messages, preservation of the device backups, and recovery of server metadata that shows when the messages were written and who else was included in the chat. Only that level of verification changes a rumor into a verifiable piece of evidence. Candace Owens' decision to publish and corroborate messages is one of the most consequential developments. When a prominent public figure takes a private conversation and makes it public, they both escalate the story and claim responsibility for verification. Owens' publication of the material did two things. It amplified the content beyond the closed circle of insiders, and it added a named witness to a claim that otherwise might have remained private. Her corroboration, the claim that she had seen the messages and that they reflected a real, urgent personal conflict, gives the leaks weight. But it also raises questions. Why were those messages shared widely now? How complete is the context? And what motives do the leakers or amplifiers have? As with any high-stakes leak, motives range from public interest to factional advantage. The responsible public response is not to accept or reject the content instantly. It is to demand forensic authentication and to seek the fuller conversation in which the line appears. Enter Josh Hammer, whose behavior has become central to accusations about denial and opportunism. Hammer, a known commentator and author, is said to have repeatedly defended a pro-Israel narrative in public, to dispute screenshots that appear incriminating and, according to these allegations, to have engaged in unusually active self-promotion the day after Kirk's death. Observers point to a pattern: rapid public defenses, a flurry of social media posts, and immediate book promotion that together look to critics like a jockeying for control of the public story. For his defenders, Hammer is a public intellectual doing what public intellectuals do, defending a perspective he believes is correct and promoting his published work in a moment of intense public interest. The ethical question is whether anyone in the public sphere should use a tragic moment to push sales or messages. The legal and factual question is whether his public statements square with the documentary record. Again, verification matters. Were the screenshots authentic? Did they represent a sustained shift in Kirk's views or an isolated, private venting? Answers come from records, not rhetoric. Adding complexity and fuel to the controversy are social media timing and behavior that observers read as suspicious. The microtimeline compiled by some analysts shows that Hammer tweeted 9 times on September 9th, including a 9:09 p.m. post, small details that become meaningful when they loop against other events. Social media posts can be used to timestamp moods, to mark public stance, or to nudge narratives. Critics argue that frequent posts on a single night indicate a concerted effort to shape perception. Allies argue that they show principled, rapid engagement. The analytics are neutral. Timestamps are timestamps. What matters is how those posts line up with other evidence: private messages, meetings, known discussions with donors, and public events. A robust reporting process would match the public posts to private records, cross-check mobile metadata, and produce an integrated timeline that shows whether activism was reactive, orchestrated, or coincidental. The claim that Hammer retweeted a 2013 Trump tweet advocating public executions, and that he did so a day before Kirk's murder, is the kind of detail that inflames public debate. If accurate, the retweet itself requires interpretation. Was it an endorsement, a historical reference, or a misclick amplified by confirmation bias? Social media artifacts are double-edged. They are incontrovertible records of what was posted, but they rarely reveal intent. Responsible journalism would capture the exact post, its context, and any subsequent commentary. Did Hammer add text? Did he remove the retweet? And did he explain it afterward? Without that fuller picture, social posts risk being weaponized as evidence of motive rather than treated as one small piece of a larger mosaic. Another claim that sharpens public suspicion is that multiple Zionist associates allegedly saw Kirk's messages yet remained publicly silent. Silence by people close to a public figure is easily read as complicity or cowardice, depending on your priors. But silence can have many causes: legal counsel advising quiet, promises to preserve private conversations, disappointment, fear of inflaming a volatile situation, or simple disbelief and a desire to verify independently before speaking. If those associates did indeed see messages indicating Kirk's shifting stance and chose not to disclose, the question is why? Documentary proof, logs, email forwards, device backups would show who had access and when. Ethics and governance questions follow. What obligations do close associates have to disclose when a public figure's views shift dramatically at a time of crisis? There are no easy answers, but culture and law both suggest that transparency is preferable when public safety and public policy collide. The allegations of hypocrisy and deliberate obfuscation, that the public record was being managed to protect narratives, are serious and politically combustible. Critics suggest that individuals and groups rushed into public defense of a position that the private messages undermined, and that some sought to hijack Kirk's legacy for political advantage. That accusation blends motive and outcome. If someone used a tragic event to cement a political narrative that obscures inconvenient facts, that would be ethically dubious. But proving intent requires more than pattern recognition. It requires documentary evidence showing coordination, pre-existing talking points, or explicit instructions to mislead. That is the sort of proof that only thorough, nonpartisan inquiry can provide. As the story spread, it stoked conspiracy thinking and polarized debate. Online, allegations mutate quickly. A private line becomes a broader indictment. A cautious journalist's question turns into a proof of cover-up. That is the nature of highly charged political moments. They create fertile ground for theory-making, and every new detail is treated as confirmation by one side and as fabrication by the other. The social consequence is deep. People double down on identity-aligned narratives, and public discourse becomes less about testing facts and more about defending positions. That is why even careful, verified journalism is essential in moments like this. Clear sourcing, transparent forensic methods, and patient exposition deflate rumor and promote accountability. So what would resolve these competing claims? Independent verification at scale. For the leaked screenshots, forensic authentication would show whether they came from the devices they claim, whether timestamps are original, and whether messages were edited. For the public actions of commentators, full archives of social media posts and any deleted or edited versions should be secured and examined for context. For the alleged silence of associates, documentary trails, emails, messages, calendar entries would show who knew what and when. Importantly, a credible resolution would require neutral intermediaries, independent journalists with access to original files, forensic labs that can attest to metadata integrity, and, when necessary, courts that can review sensitive material under seal and produce reasoned public summaries. There is also a deeper structural takeaway here. Private shifts in political belief by a public figure raise governance questions. High-profile organizers and media personalities stand at an intersection of influence. They speak to audiences, they solicit funds, and they shape policy debates. When their private views diverge from their public activities, accountability mechanisms are weak. Boards, donors, and audiences all have partial levers: moral pressure, funding decisions, and market response, but none substitute for transparent governance norms that should guide how movements and media entities handle internal dissent and shifting convictions. Finally, this story is an ethical test of public life. The rush to judgment, the use of tragedy for publicity, the weaponization of private texts, all of these practices corrode trust. The only durable remedy is methodical verification and norms that privilege verification over viral assertion. The public has a right to know what happened and why. But that right is best served by process, forensics, audited timelines, legal review where appropriate, and then public reporting that lays out evidence and counter-evidence plainly. The material now in circulation, alleged private messages showing Kirk's intent to leave the pro-Israel cause, public amplifications and denials by media figures, and a social media cadence that looks like either furious defense or opportunistic promotion, changes how many people see the last days of Charlie Kirk's life. But changing perception is not the same as proving a story. Confirming what actually happened requires independent authentication of leaked messages, full archival of public posts and their metadata, and a transparent reconstruction of interactions among associates. Until those steps are taken, the competing narratives will persist. One side will insist the leaks reveal a painful truth about influence and conscience. The other will argue that private venting and selective publishing produce false impressions and deserve cautious treatment. The only way forward is clear: preserve the originals, run forensic tests, allow neutral experts to review them under appropriate protections, and publish reason summaries that the public can evaluate. Demand that process. Insist on evidence. Only then can accountability be credible rather than merely loud.